Okay, I finally got this to work. Go through the code from top to bottom. So we have my import libraries, system, socket. I don't actually use time, so that shouldn't be in there. I'm gonna delete that when I submit it. I have import OS, and from the threading, from thread, I imported the function threading, so I can just call thread directly. I have my first function here. It's called usage. That's just going to be printing out the script name if the user starts the file incorrectly. I eliminated quite a few things here. So in my create thread method, all I do is make one thread. It's the sending thread. That's the one I decided to use because you said we could just pick one that we aren't going to be running in main. So I picked the send message thread instead of instead of starting it from inside of main, I just start it once the method gets called automatically. I return the thread. Here is what the function looks like for send message. So there's a while true loop. So while this is correct, we're going to be looking for standard input. Take the first line. If it exists, we're going to send that message in an encoded byte form over to the other socket. Otherwise, I have this print statement that doesn't print. That was for error handling. That means we're going to send a shutdown. So there's no more standard input, and we're going to be killing the send threads that are not running on main. And we're going to start a socket shutdown, and then we do os.exit, and that just means we're killing all the processes, so sending the kill to the main thread. It's very important. If we just did a system exit, we wouldn't be able to terminate the other threads in Python. So then there's the receive message that I should mention earlier. It takes the input of a sock. The send message is the same thing. So it takes the input parameter of sock in this while true loop. I have everything in a try and accept statement because if the receive message attempts to receive something from a socket that is closed, it's gonna cause a win or an OS error. I forget exactly what the message is, but you just need to have a handler in there in case the socket is closed before it starts attempting to call receive. Receive blocks until a message is delivered. So once that gets delivered to the max is 1024 bytes, it gets decoded because it comes in byte format, decoded into UTF-8, which allows us to print it onto a string. This if statement's a little different. I could have just done if message, but I said if message is equal to empty a string, which is essentially none. We're going to call socket shutdown on this side, close the socket, and then we have, okay, then the else statement, if the message exists and we print it, I have strip at the end in case there is an extra indentation we do not want. Then, like I said, there's the accept and the process. If there's any issues, which would have been the socket, is already closed before it receives the message. Let's go scroll down to main. I'm going to have to bring this up 1 second. Okay, scroll down to main. I assigned the system arguments to argc minus the name of the file. So this will be either the -l flag or the port number. So if the length of the argument is less than 1, meaning that the only thing that got inputted was the name of the file, we're just going to return that usage statement above, which outputs this string plus the name of the file. I assigned localhost to this variable or this string object host. I'll use that later on. The first part of the Boolean is going to allow us to enter the server socket. We look to see if the first indice of the argc object I have is the L flag, and that would tell us that we're going to the server socket. So if we're going to create a server socket. This allows us to do the TCP IP thing. And then we say server socket dot set sock option. So this allows us to reuse the same port address if it's already being used. The 1 tells us that this socket is turned on. We're going to put it into a listening state. We can leave this string empty. It's not necessary in a server. And we call it to bind to whatever port number is at this address. And It's a string, so we have to cast it into an integer. We set it into a listening state to wait for 5 seconds, or not 5, actually 5, I believe, is the amount of sockets that that can wait on. I forget exactly what that means, but now it's in a waiting state. So once something has been accepted, we assign it to a sock. We assign it to sock and address, and the sock is now going to be a server client socket, if you will. We have the address here that's going to be stored too. And we don't need the server socket anymore, so we can close that. At this point, I accept, again, we've established the server client socket. Now we can create our send thread. That's the only thread I'm going to create that's not in main. I have a while loop that says while the send thread I just created is alive, we're going to call the receive message function, which is above. We input our socket, our server client socket that we just binded to, or we just accepted. The next part of the Boolean is if else statement is the client socket. So we create a client socket right here at the first line, and the second line we're gonna make the address reusable using this second input, the second argument. So reuse address one means that we're turning that on, and then we connect to the host. Again, host is localhost. You need that for the client, and we enter the port address, which is string, so we convert it again. And then I do the same thing as I did before. I create a single send thread object, and then input the socket, the client socket, and then I say while this send thread is alive, we're going to receive messages, and we have this same input, the client socket. As soon as we can go back up here, as soon as somebody interrupts sending a message through standard import or does some other type of exit, that's going to tell the other socket to shut down gracefully and terminate the process using the OS exit. All right, that's my messenger homework. It works finally. Okay, stop recording.